This is Bigfoot style applications. So the stance is like this. From here, you can bring your arm up, step forward, pull your opponent's hands down, punch and bring a knee up at the same time, then pull them into two kicks, then do a hammer fist, and then come in to a stomach punch where you grab them and you pull them in. That can be done just from the stance, but it can also be done on after you do this move, where you're here and you move slightly back and you pull in into a crouch stance. Then from here, you throw a punch like this, then you come up and you throw an elbow at your opponent's head. Now, that move can be done just from the stance, but it can also be set up in one of four ways. So way number one is if your opponent is coming into you and trying to close the distance using movement. So in that case, you're here, and what you want to do is you want to fall back into this empty stance like that, and then when your opponent comes into range, come back and do the move. Now, if your opponent is trying to close the distance, if your opponent is trying to get away from you using movement, then what you can do is put a backhand into their face to distract them, step forward, and do two knees and piercing palms, then go into the move. Now, if your opponent is coming into you with strikes, or swarming you with strikes, what you can do is you can fall back into this stance like that, and as they get close, you can hook their leg and go with that move. And finally, if your opponent is keeping you away from them by throwing strikes, every time you get close, they throw such a hard strike that pushes you back, or stings you, then you can counter the strike by before, during, or right after they throw. You can come in and you can clasp one of their elbows like this. Then from here, you can go around into the move. You can really pull them back and then fall into the move. You can raise a leg up and then jump into the move. Or you can throw the arm over your head, punch them in the stomach, and then hook the move. Now, those four can be done from the stance, but they can also be set up by doing this motion, where you either just throw your hands over, or you step back and then throw your hands over like this, twist around, and then as you spin, that's when you'll go into one of those setups. So that's the first line of attacks. Additionally, you can also distract your opponent with a hand, your right hand, step forward and throw an elbow, then step forward and throw another elbow. Now that can be done from the stance, but it can also be set up. So one thing you can do, it can be set up from this move, where you jump a little bit backwards and your back hands make a connection with your opponent's hands. From here, you want to throw a punch like that, and then come down and punch them into the stomach. Now that move can be thrown directly from the stance, but it can also be set up. So if your opponent is trying to come into you with movement, then you can take this stance, and when they get into range, hit the move. If your opponent is trying to get away from you with movement, then what you can do is you can throw 3 uppercuts and go into the move like that. If your opponent is swarming you with strikes, getting close, then what you can do is fall into this T stance, and then once they get into range, hit that move. And if your opponent is stinging you and keeping you off of them with strikes, then what you can do is before, during, or right after they throw their move, you can push down one of their hands, throw a hammer fist, step up, throw a second hammer fist, and then go into that move. Now, all those setups can be done from the stance, or they can be set up from either just throwing a double punch like that, or falling backwards into this and then throwing a double punch. So that's the second line of attack, and then those 2 are the main lines of attack. After every successful attack, what you want to do is you want to pivot by going back to your stance. So if you successfully elbowed them, then you want to pivot out like that and go back to your stance. Now, sometimes, or if you do the crouch stance elbow, or this bow stance punch, and your opponent gets to your left side, which happens often, then one way to defend yourself is spinning your hands over your head, smashing down their hands, trying to kind of grab their hands and tie them up, then jumping to the side and jabbing them off of you, punching them off of you like that. If you are doing a crouch stance elbow and your opponent blocks or counters in some ways, one option is to, from this elbow, throw a crescent kick and then jump into this punch. And if you throw this punch and your opponent blocks it or dodges or counters in some ways, one option is to take both your hands and get them so they're resting on top of your opponent's hands, then doing that twisting motion, punch them into the stomach, and then go to the elbow. Now, if you're doing the motion where you're doing this combo and your opponent blocks, dodges, or counters it, one option you have is to, while you're doing it, you can spin around into this crouch stance elbow motion, then finish it up with that elbow. And if you're doing this elbow attack and your opponent blocks, dodges, or counters it, you can throw yourself into the T stance, do a triple palm poke, and then go right into the other combination. And then those 4 switch moves can also be used just to start the combinations as well. Finally, the step forward snap kick, and then the horse stance punch, where you kind of post off your opponent like that, then do a chamber punch, can be done at any time and when your opponent's defense starts to break down.